Hi, and welcome to Wrong Way! And today we'll be reviewing the Extreme Bull Commander High Torque. So, let me tell you more about it.
Wrong Way!
So it's already been a month since I received the Extreme Bull Commander HT for testing, and in that time I've done around 500 kilometers in all possible conditions. I also took it apart, I checked what the battery and safety of the wheel is, so in this review we will cover pretty much everything about the wheel. The review will be structured into 6 categories, although if you need any further information you can also check out my teardown and my riding impressions video and the unboxing. But the 6 main chapters will be safety, durability and build quality, ride, performance, features, and finally a conclusion. Big thanks to my e-wheel for providing me this wheel for testing purposes, and if you want to purchase a wheel in Europe, feel free to use their site and my coupon code WRONGWAY for a 5% discount. I also do receive kickback from these orders, so you also do help out the channel by using those links and coupon codes. I've also set up a YouTube channel membership program, which you can see below the video. If you want to join and have some custom emojis and maybe some custom channel membership messages or posts, then feel free to join. Without any further ado though, let's get into the video. The first category is safety, and though this wheel has Extreme Bull in their name, it uses a lot of the parts made by Bigode or Guads. So a lot of the electronics and the battery system and in general the tech in this wheel is borrowed from Bigode. Actually, the owner of this company is, I think, the brother of the owner of Bigode. So you'll see a lot of similarities here. Alright, so let's get into it, and some of this info might be a bit technical, but I hope you'll be able to follow. First up is the BMS or Battery Management System. And essentially what Extreme Bull is using here is the same thing or the same design as 900 watt-hour 100 volt Bigode packs. So we have 4 900 watt-hour packs with BMSs strapped to them individually, and they're also communicating with each other. Now this new BMS design also features a P-line for charging, so this is great because if something's wrong with the BMS or if there's too much input power from the charger, so like more than 3 amps per pack, then I can shut it off. And the separate line may also protect from short circuits or like long-lasting short circuits coming from the charger. There is no fuse in the BMS, however there is logic sort of designed to act as a fuse. However, this poses a problem because once something happens there, you need to change the BMS, and changing a BMS is very tiresome and very difficult to do, and many companies will not even accept to do such a thing. So I hope that in the future they will include at least fuses like Veteran Sherman or Veteran Abrams. 100.8 volts is the maximum voltage that is safe for the cells that they are using here, and the charger is set to 101.2 volts when it gets warm, which poses a problem in quicker degradation of the battery cells. Now, it's a problem because the chargers aren't set correctly out of factory or when they get warm, and big thanks to you, Michał Kowalski, for finding out about that. And this leads to a voltage of 100.8 or 100.9 on the battery output. So even before the BMS, the voltage might be even higher. Now, the charger is one thing, but actually the BMS should regulate this voltage. And in my case, the wheel was still a bit too high. And in my friend Michał's case, he also has an Extreme Bull Commander, was also too high. When the charger was plugged in, it was even at 101.3 volts. Other companies do have a lower voltage of the battery, lower maximum voltage, which increases the lifespan of those battery packs, and it's also a bit safer for regenerative braking. However, I'll dive into this subject deeper in a future video about a Bigode battery safety announcement. The battery cells that the Commander is using are LGM50s at the time of recording this video, so these are high capacity cells. I would rather see some high discharge cells with a lower inner resistance, because then you can achieve more power with less resistance, and the batteries will have also a longer lifespan. They can deliver and also receive more amps, both for acceleration and deceleration. However, it is a huge pack at 24S 8P, so with regular riding style, it should be fine. But what is not fine is the electronical setup of the BMS, the battery packs, and the motherboard. So essentially there's no way to check what's happening with the BMS or with the individual cell sets, because it's not a smart BMS, it's a passive BMS, but that's what's now in the most wheels. But I will hope that in the future all of our wheels will have a smart BMS. Second of all, there is no communication between the BMSs and the motherboard. There's just the hot wire, which just delivers the pure electricity to the motherboard, which then puts it to the motor. There's no communication wire like in other wheels. And you essentially can't find out if the BMS is even broken or not unless you take it apart. So the motherboard doesn't know actually if a BMS is broken. So you can have two BMSs or two packs, one pack broken, and you will keep using the wheel as is, which you shouldn't. Now it should cut off or like not use the broken one, but still using the wheel without knowing and just having 3 packs instead of 4. Now you would probably notice it when you're charging, or especially if you have less range, but that is something that you need to keep an eye on, which you do not need to keep an eye on in other companies. Essentially, if something's wrong with the BMS or batteries on a veteran Sherman or on an emotion wheel, you will get either a notification, or you can check the app, or you will see something on the screen on the Sherman. There is no temperature sensor on the BMS either, and PET, Personal Electric Transport in London, had an issue with that. Essentially with the first version of the BMS, it just like melted the shrink wrap, so that's dangerous as well, I guess. All of these packs are connected in parallel with XT60 plugs, and at the end there's just one wire going to the motherboard. So there's less redundancy and also a weaker connector than we see on other wheels. For example, on a veteran Sherman, there is one wire going from one battery pack, and there's 2 battery packs. So if one battery pack breaks or one BMS breaks, the other one still works and it will tilt you back to a stop. If this one breaks, well, it just, cuts off, turns off. Furthermore, the wheel also does have a hot charge port in comparison to other wheels, which do have a communication wire there that allow current to flow through the charge port just if a charger is inserted. This is just mind-boggling that this feature is still here in 2022. So why do I tell you about it? Well, in most cases, probably you won't have an issue. Like, probably the wheel will work fine. But if something goes haywire and just the right amount of things goes wrong, you will have a massive problem, ranging from a damaged battery pack, or your wheel is out of order for a longer time, to, in the worst case, as we already saw with other Bigode wheels, having a fire. So the question really is, if you want a wheel that is 100% or more safe than this one, or if you want to risk it and still pay a lot of money for a product that doesn't really give you the most amount of safety. Now don't worry, it's not all bad stuff. I'll also move on to the good stuff, but I have to cross every item off of my list that I have in my notes here. Furthermore, there is no system embedded high-speed tilt back, so essentially you can go as fast as you want on the wheel until it cuts off. But what I set up in my app, on the Bigode app, is around 51 kilometers an hour. That's where I think the safe top speed limit for the tilt back is on this wheel. Same thing applies for overpowering it. However, there you can sort of feel it if you go like really up a steep hill, that the motor sort of crunches. It's not really good for the motor or the motherboard, but there you can sort of feel it out where the wheel starts to give in a bit. Their only system embedded safety in terms of riding is the beep for over voltage, which is at 102 volts, and then the wheel should also come to a stop. Mind you, that's already way too high. The second one is the 80% beep. So if you use more than 80% of the power, it will beep at you. And you will not hear it if you're going fast, because the beeper is just located inside of the wheel. It's not audible at all. Just forget about hearing the beeper here. You need to set up different alarms on your app that you can actually hear. And the third alarm is against temperature. So if the wheel gets too hot, then it will also not allow you to ride. The wheel does tend to run a bit hotter than what I'm used to, mainly thanks to the construction of the heat dissipation system, and Bigode more often than not putting any sort of thermal paste between the radiators and the motherboard radiator. But in the winter conditions I didn't have many issues with that. I would hope that it would tilt back before the motherboard blows, but as we've seen also in Electric Dreams videos, sometimes they just burn without notice. I heard that in the newest version they improved the cooling and they also added another cooling fan, but sadly that's nothing that I can currently test. Your best bet for having also a cooler running wheel is to get a high torque version. When it comes to good sides, the motherboard is actually really rock solid, and especially for heavier riders it should pretty much at any point of your riding speed up to, like, I know, 40 kilometers an hour have enough torque to get you out of any stressful situations. Now these boards, just like similar on the RS board or I don't know, the EXN board, they just tend to work really well and be solid. Definitely more power available and more power reserve than in motion wheels, and on a similar level are also more powerful than King Songs. From what I was testing, the power limits were also set reasonably and I could hear the beep, I could also overpower it. Definitely at higher speeds, this wheel doesn't shine so much as at lower speeds, as expected in the high torque version. The water resistance is also quite impressive for a wheel that is related to Bigode. I was riding it through off-road conditions, in the rain, in misty weather, and the wheel was totally clean inside. Now there is some improvement to be made, especially putting some silicone between the two halves of the shell and also improving just a bit the area around the extendable trolley handle, but I gotta say, for a Bigode related product, the water resistance here is quite astonishing. The battery packs are also tightly packed, they're not rattling around, a lot better than what I usually see at Bigode, but there is no plastic or metal casing around them, which would really drive the safety point home. And I'm closing it off with no transport mode. This wheel, compared to pretty much any other wheel that you can currently buy on the market, can turn on while being transported in a box. So the button isn't that accessible. It's in the front area of the wheel, but still, if there's a short on a button, if for some reason the button is pressed, the wheel can turn on, and this is highly dangerous, especially for transportation. Bigode or Extreme Bull, please find a way to turn on transport mode. It's ridiculous that this wheel doesn't have it. So with all of that said, I hope you get a good idea about safety. Let's now move on to the next chapter, which is durability, build quality, and I'll mix in also a bit of ergonomics. So first up, QC issues, and Bigode is really known for QC issues, but with Extreme Bull we don't really yet know about it. When looking at the inside, this looks a bit like a, garage made product. Definitely doesn't look as professional, but on the other side it also looks pretty simple to repair. Now I wouldn't advise you to do any work on this wheel by yourself. It's best to send it to a service shop or to a dealer where you bought it at, but we're yet to find out if those wheels really have a good quality control. The plastics on the wheel aren't the most aesthetically pleasing, but they look pretty solid. Maybe they just don't fit with one another that well, but I think that they can handle quite a bit of rough falls. The wheel doesn't have a roll cage though, which would protect it in crashes, and the roll cage is also a pretty nice feature for mounting additional accessories. The wheel also has a lot of sharp edges, so I can imagine that those can break in a harder fall. The sharp edges are also on the handles. Be on the lookout for those. If you want to just lift up the wheel, you can actually hurt yourself. It's best to lift it up with your gloves. The Commander has a older style motor, like we can see on the Guads MSP high speed or high torque, which doesn't have a hollow motor. On one side it's better because there's less issues reported with bearings in terms of this motor, but on the other side the hollow motor is way more durable, especially for heavier riders. So some positives and negatives about that. The stock tire fitted here is the CST C186, so that's pretty durable, and there's also lots of room inside of the wheel well for the tire and also debris to get in and out, so don't imagine any leaves getting stuck there unless you're going really hard off-roading and leaving some really big portions of nature in there. The durability of the rim should be similar to what we see in Guads, so I guess it's sort of durable, but I guess not really strong. The wheel also feels noticeably bigger than the Sherman, especially the top part is wider, and all in all it feels chunkier than the Sherman. For me, it's rather nicer to have a bit of a thinner wheel like the Sherman, and it's also more angled, more contoured towards your ergonomics, but some might also prefer this chunkiness of the Commander, especially Monocat liked it a lot. Last but not least, let's talk about the stock pedals, and the stock pedals are really huge, which is nice, but they're also heavy at 1 kilogram each, and they're very slippery. I think they're even more slippery than grip tape, so I think there's definitely some room for improvement, just fitting some MTB pins instead of these funny, I don't know, cone-shaped things onto the pedals that might also be damaged in the long run. Yeah, I just use this wheel constantly with the Nova pedals, and with those pedals I really enjoyed it. Also the side pads, I didn't even try to put them on because yeah, they're not jump pads, they look like they have not enough room for my legs. I just wouldn't use them at all. The only side pads I was using on this wheel mostly were the torque pads, and also put a little bit of a yoga mat over them to have a good grip. Now let's move on to the ride. And this section will be a bit shorter because I already made a video just about the ride of this wheel, so if you feel like anything is missing in this section, check out my ride video, which is linked in the upper right corner. That being said, I get the feeling that the Commander is just my favorite wheel to ride, like pretty much ever. It has all of the things that I would love in a ride of the wheel. First of all, it has a long range and is very comfortable, and even going over cobblestone, over off-road, going downstairs, upstairs, the software just feels so right. The pedals stay planted, and unless you're doing a extreme acceleration, only then they just dip slightly, or when extreme braking they also go up slightly. But tell you what, the software of this wheel is amazing, and it's the first product related to Pagoda or like Sherman that also doesn't have pretty much any pedal dipping in terms. It's quite astonishing. The torque is insane, the braking is amazing, and yeah, that's just really cool about the wheel. The only thing I might change, or might have wanted to change, is the tire. Or the rim actually, because it feels really like a big Tesla. So I don't like taking turns fast on this wheel at all because I'm afraid to clip the pedals. My Sherman feels a lot better in turns. It's actually gripping. Here I feel like running a bit on stilts, but therefore it doesn't have any train tracking, and it's super comfortable on straights. It's way easier also to sit down on it than on the Sherman. In general, I think this wheel is just like a long range cruiser, but it also packs an insane punch because of the torque. I don't like turning on it. I don't really like going speedy on it. Usually I was going anywhere between 20 and 50 kilometers an hour, but also accelerating and going a bit faster at the 50 kilometers an hour or at any speed, it feels really effortless. So this software is just amazing, and it also allows you to be very precise off-road, and yeah, the ride of this wheel is really great. Now let's talk a bit about performance, and let's talk first about torque. I made pretty much all of my incline tests, 30 degrees, 35 degrees, 40, going forwards, going backwards, up a 35-degree incline. The only one I didn't do is the 45er, but I was a bit afraid with the temperatures outside, and I really didn't want to damage the wheel. But it has insane torque, just like the EXN torque, but it feels even more accessible and more direct. The top speed here is around 55 to 60 kilometers an hour, but I set my tilt back to 51, as said before, because especially in those higher speeds, it's easier to overpower the wheel, and at lower battery levels like 10, 20, 30%, you get the beeps even earlier, like 45, and there's no progressive tilt back here. So I tend to ride this wheel relatively slowly, also because of the turns. But if you go on a street, 50 kilometers an hour is something that you'll be comfortable with. But we can't forget about the insane range of this thing. Well, I nearly did. This thing packs a 3600 watt-hour battery pack, and just like the Monster Pro, this wheel has insane range. I did a single range test with it in relatively cold conditions, and my average speed was a lot higher than in usual tests because it's just so easy to go quicker, like 40, 45, 50 kilometers an hour on this wheel. And it was around 130 kilometers, and the wheel wasn't totally dead yet. So it's 30 kilometers more than my Veteran Sherman range test. Typically, when riding this wheel, you will not have any range anxiety. And for going far distances, well, and it's in a small package still, it's kind of tempting, but the safety concerns still would keep me away from it. And even when doing the range test, I noticed that it's way more practical for long rides than the Monster Pro, as it's way better off-road. I think it's actually a great off-road wheel. It's insanely capable, but it's also comfortable on long asphalt paths, going uphill, downhill. It's really just like a good performing combination. I was riding this wheel just in hard mode because the medium mode felt just like soft mode, where the pedals sort of lean in one way but then they wouldn't go back. I really didn't like the medium mode of this wheel, as well as the soft. I didn't even try soft mode. I thought that if medium mode is so soft, I won't try the soft mode. But in hard mode there was no pedal dipping in successive bumps, there was no pedal dipping in turns. Hard mode was just really enjoyable on this wheel. Alright, let's get into the features now. 3, 2, 1, go! First up, let's talk Bluetooth speakers. And the thing I don't mention much in reviews is the Bluetooth connection to the speaker on the wheel. In this one, it's insanely good. Like, you can be really far from it and the Bluetooth speakers still work and the music doesn't crack, the connection doesn't get lost. However, the speakers are in the back, so just people behind you will hear the music. You will hear the music very poorly, so I sometimes tended to use my JBL Clip Bluetooth speaker to go on rides, because the back speaker is just like pretty much useless for the rider. It's very muffled then. But if somebody is riding in front of you on a Commander and the music is shooting directly at you, the music is actually really enjoyable. In terms of lighting, the taillights are pretty weak, but that's because of the shell, which is really dark. That's something we also saw on the V12. However, they are brighter than on the V12, and there's also 3 LED strips, and they also get brighter when you brake. So they are more visible than the V12, but I would still put a shred light or, you know, any other light in the back to make yourself more visible. The front lights are pretty mediocre in terms of, you know, coverage, but the thing that I really appreciate now is that they don't blind anyone. So if I go on a bicycle path, you know, just going 20-25 kilometers an hour, I don't really need to see that well. I mean, it would be great to have a light like the V11, but I much prefer this over the extremely blinding lights of the RS or MSP. The beam is also not height adjustable, so sadly, if your toes are lower than your heels, you will get a lot less of a good beam than if your wheel is calibrated flat. Then we also have the mood lighting on the side, which is visible in the night. I guess it could be a bit brighter, but it's also not too intrusive, so I don't know, pretty nice. But the thing I don't like is that if you turn on or off the front headlight, you also toggle the mode of those mood lights. I wish just it didn't work. Like, just set up the mood lights once in the app and that's enough. And that's something I keep telling for years now. It would be nice if they finally would change that. One thing that is lacking here on the Extreme Bull Commander is a lift switch. Just like on the Veteran Sherman, you have to turn off the wheel and then turn it on again after going up or down a staircase. Not really easy to implement a reasonable solution here, but hey, just something to note. The trolley handle is something that Goat could learn from Extreme Bull. It's pretty tall, it locks in place both on top and on the bottom. Sometimes the plastic gets stuck, the plastic button, but it's no big deal. I think that the trolley handle of the Extreme Bull Commander is really solid. There is no easy tire change on the wheel though, you have to take it fully apart to just change a tire. So just like basically any other unicycle, it's really a big hassle to change a tire or a tube on the wheel. Extreme Bull has also blessed us with a display on top, which is exactly the same that you can see on Begode wheels. It's really bright in the night, almost like too bright, but in broad daylight you can't pretty much see it. I think there is a dark foil needed, or like a dark plastic screen protector needed to make the display visible in broad daylight. I just used some tape and it worked pretty well. The display has some useful information and some less useful, of course. First of all, it's pretty small and it's rather in the middle of the shell, so I would like to have it more forward to see it a bit more easily when riding. The speed is fairly well visible and that is a nice feature, but the battery indicator is kind of small and very hard to see. It's also kind of inaccurate by just using 5 bars. Typically I would use the app to see the percentage readout of the battery or the voltage. None of those are available on the screen. You can also see the odometer there, which isn't that useful, but what is useful is that you can also see the temperature of the main board. Now it's not super accurate, probably like the InMotion wheels, which have actually 5 temperature sensors and also a sensor in the motor. I don't believe there's a sensor in the motor here, but it's still nice to see what the temperature of the motherboard more or less is. The wheel also has a mudguard kickstand combo. Now for me it's not the most reliable one. I would just pretty much use it indoors, and if the surface is really flat, then outdoors. Typically I don't even do that because the compartments on the wheel are rather interconnected and I don't feel like putting the wheel so much far back in regular daily use. And especially if it's raining. The mudguard does protect you mostly from mud, but your feet will still get a bit dirty in the back, and especially the wheel would get dirty. All in all, it could be a bit longer, just like on the Veteran Sherman, because it also does tend to spray a lot behind you. So if somebody's riding behind you, you'll get mud or water sprayed pretty high up behind the Extreme Bull Commander. The front of the wheel doesn't have any mudguard, so your toes, your feet, your shoes will likely get wet when riding through puddles or just generally in rain. Well, they would probably get wet anyways, but a little less, I guess, if there wouldn't be the tire spraying water onto your feet. And that would be pretty much it. Let's just conclude it all. The Extreme Bull Commander is really a bipolar wheel for me, and it's kinda sad for me not to consider this wheel as a potential purchase for myself, because if it wasn't for the safety, I would probably prefer it over the Sherman. But with the safety as it is at Gotway, at Begode, I'm still concerned. I'm not feeling comfortable going with this wheel into a store, leaving it somewhere, or, you know, taking it onto a train with me. I really want the highest level of available safety, the highest reasonable level of available safety for my wheels, and this is what will still keep me away from it. Now, for most cases, probably it will be fine, but it's still the small percentage that would keep me stressed. So with that said, leave a like on the video, subscribe to see more content like this. I'll see you in the next video. See you soon.